What's going on, everybody? It's Elon from Inside Fighting. We're back to the original format where I sit down and review styles. And I found by accident, I'm going to tell you the story, an amazing style called Nippon Kempo. This is very different from every other style of Kempo I've seen. It's a very unique system. It's actually old. It's from like the early 1930s. We'll jump right in right now. Stay tuned. This one is awesome. If you haven't seen this style before, stay tuned. You're going to love this video.
Pow, pow, inside fighting, yeah, dangerous martial arts. Pow, pow, ooh, ah.
All right, so first let's just jump into the history of Nippon Kempo. It translates to Japanese fist law is the exact, and I'm reading that off my computer, so you know it's true. It can't be a lie. And it was founded in 1932, and I'm going to butcher this man's name. I apologize in advance. You guys know I have this problem. Muneomi Sawayama. Okay, so early 1930s. I'm going to play some sparring footage for you guys in the background as I talk about this, because I'd like for you guys to actually see what this style is about. So this is like early 1930s, 1932, and it's a precursor to a lot of the modern day MMA type of styles we see today. People like to think that like the Gracies invented the UFC and that's where all mixed martial arts came from. This is the 1930s this system was created in, and it has a very cool history and foundation. This martial artist, whose name I shall not pronounce again, was training judo with Jigoro Kano, of all people, and realized that judo is an amazing grappling style, as you can see in the system, but it lacks effective striking. There was no real focus on striking. So he went and he started training karate, kempo, and some other styles, and he incorporated it into an actual mixed martial art. Again, like 50 years prior or 60 years prior to UFC. And so like a lot of these styles don't get credit for what they are. Like a lot of these movements, if you look in the amazing sparring footage right now, existed prior to the 1980s, as people like to believe that it all kind of just exploded out of the Gracie family. Again, I may sound hostile toward the Gracies. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I love Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I just think that there's a lot of misconceptions about these styles, and we don't give enough credit where credit is due. And you look at old school judo, you look at this Nippon Kempo, which gets no attention around the world. And it's kind of sad because these are great foundational systems for MMA even today. And what they give you, which a lot of other styles don't, in that combat sports world, is they give you a focus on this more traditional training. I'm surprised he's not hurting himself here. I don't know if those floors are soft, but me doing that with the multiple ruptured discs in my neck would result in a little bit of numbness in my arms. But they do a lot of hardcore break falling. They do a lot of stuff that is missed in a lot of combat sports. I cannot tell you how many combat sports schools I've been to, even jiu-jitsu academies, where high-level guys do not know how to break fall properly from a throw. It's a very weird thing to see. And I think that's why you'll see heightened injuries in a lot of these places, because a lot of this old school traditional training got thrown out for what's more trendy and cool and what schools can make money off of. This is an example of a system that gives you, excuse me, the combat sport aspect, but is also giving you the traditional aspect. Because as much as it's a combat sport, it also still clearly has, as you can see, these fundamental traditional aspects to it. Even when they finished there, he didn't just start ground and pounding the guy. One punch, stand up. That's more of like a, you'll see that in karate tournaments. They're still maintaining a little bit of that. And again, what you see here are some really, really nice throws that you typically just don't see in more modern day MMA. These are more judo throws. Because they're wearing clothes, it changes the dynamic of the game that they can do these throws because they're wearing clothes. This is very much closer to like Daido Juko or Kudo, which I believe this is like the grandfather of. If we were to look at this system, this is probably the precursor to the modern day Kudo systems. So this whole concept of like revolutionizing karate, I actually believe this is closer to what old school martial arts probably look like. I think the standard historically was things that look closer to MMA with protective gear like this, whatever they could create at the time, right? They obviously didn't have these kind of helmets, but I'm sure they made makeshift helmets. And even historically, I'm talking about like hundreds of years ago, the way people would have trained, this is probably what naturally occurred, because in the end of the day, all martial arts evolve into the same kind of hodgepodge, just with different focuses. So some might be a little bit more grappling oriented, some might be more sport oriented, some might be self-defense oriented. But in the end of the day, a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick, an eye gouge is an eye gouge, a throw is a throw. And depending on the context of your sport or your martial art, techniques will form similarly in all of them for that context. So as much as people, again, want to believe Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is so unique in its approach to grappling, Sambo, old school judo, even Shuai Jiao, even old school Chinese grappling systems, catch wrestling, all have had similarities to it. And that's kind of the beauty of martial arts. Back to Nippon Kempo. What I really, really like about Nippon Kempo, again, I look for certain things in systems I train. Number one, I'm getting older. I look for safety. I don't want to take full force shots to the head. If you look at the way these guys train, here they're obviously competing, so they're hitting each other hard, but they train very effectively. It doesn't look like they're cracking each other in the head full force. They're very technical, very traditional. They run traditional drills, and I really like that about the system. And again, something for me is that a system has some degree of history and culture. I know that's not a standard for a lot of people, but in the end of the day, I'm still training a martial art for the art aspect to some extent. Otherwise, I'll just go train combat sports. So if I'm going to go train kickboxing, modern day American kickboxing, let's say, I know that I'm going in there for the combat sport aspect. I'm not going in there for the culture and the tradition. But something here that you get, which is really nice, is some degree of culture and tradition, even outside of all this sparring. Let me just pause this one and we'll go back to the video here that I had, which is pretty interesting in terms of them just training together. You can see they're running good drills. But this is like stuff you would see in a traditional good karate class, except they take this and they go spar with it, MMA rules with protective gear. And I love that. I love that they have this aspect in their training. A lot of people think kata is useless, but bunkai style kata, where you actually put application to it with a partner, I very much like that. I like partner-based kata a lot. And a lot of people nowadays are all about like, no, we don't need to train the traditional aspects. We just need to go fight. Like you look at the whole ecological jiu-jitsu approach, it's just all games. I think a lot of historical success for athletes of any kind we're seeing in drilling, repeating the same motion over and over and over. That's something you just see more in traditional martial arts that's lost a lot of the days now on combat sports. So I give a lot of credit where credit is due. And I mean, these are beautiful technique drills. And again, you see they describe it as katas on the bottom. So these are two partner drills that are kata-based drills, and they're showing the bunkai, the actual application of it. You know what's interesting? I forgot to tell you guys the story. So the reason I found Nippon Kempo is because there's a Shorinji Kempo school near my place. I'm going to go check out the Shorinji Kempo school. I like Shorinji Kempo. I find it very unique. You look at their two-partner drills, exactly what you see here. In Shorinji Kempo, the two-partner drills are unbelievable. I think Shorinji Kempo is lacking in the sparring department, which Nippon Kempo has. So the whole reason I found this is because I typed in Shorinji Kempo sparring, because I wanted to see what I could get into if I were to, in fact, train this system. And so I started looking at YouTube videos of Shorinji Kempo sparring, and I found some super cool videos. And I was like, man, Shorinji Kempo is amazing. It's my dream style. It's like modern day MMA, but it gives me a little bit of the traditional fighting. It has more protective gear. It's almost impossible to find a kudo school anywhere in the United States. So I was like, this is the perfect system. There's a school near my house. I'll find, the perfect place to train. Because again, I do Kyokushin, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I train with my own guys, I do Filipino martial arts, but there's no place I really go to put it all together. I do that with my own guys, essentially, like the people I bring here to spar with. We just get together and we spar, and we allow takedowns, we allow grappling, the rules you see here. But there's nowhere I go where I'm not the coach where I experienced that. It's always the reason I've spoken so fondly of systems like Ashihara or Enshin, ones that are trying to evolve karate. But then from 1932, there was already a system doing this called Nippon Kempo. And the Shorinji Kempo thing that I found, I'm going way off on a tangent here. The school that I found, the Shorinji Kempo school, when I was looking up the sparring footage, was totally different. And I was like, why is it all totally different? And then I went back and I looked at the videos I found of sparring of Shorinji Kempo. And it was in the comments, everyone's like, this is not Shorinji, it's Nippon Kempo. And I started going down the rabbit hole of Nippon Kempo, which of course, again, is a system you will never find in the United States. So hallelujah on that one. And I think I showed this video before. I went to the wrong one, but just look at this one right here. Just really clean sparring. I like this kind of fighting. Again, I naturally am inclined and drawn to this kind of martial art. Not necessarily because I think it's the most effective. I think it's definitely the most effective for one-on-one unarmed combat, to do MMA style rules. When I don't think it's the most effective is the fact that it might not teach you to deal with multiple attackers, no situational awareness, which is a huge part of real street combatives. As great as these systems are, traditional and combat sports, I've never been to a combat sports school or traditional style that really gives the attention and time to situational awareness and pre-fight engagement that it should. Everything in these schools is always based on, we're already fighting and this is what it looks like. So this is a cool video showing the traditional aspects of how they train. And so that's just something in general that if you want to get pre-fight engagement, you want to get good street awareness, you're going to have to go to a combatives school for that. You know, like whatever it is, Krav Maga or whatever combative school you go to will teach you what to do before the fight starts. You could be a great fighter, but if you end up in a high stress situation that you weren't ready for because you've only been training in the gym and you get to the street and your hands are down, your chin's up, you're arguing with this guy, you're getting heated, his friend is sneaking up behind you, you're not going to win that fight no matter how good a fighter you are. You will not win that fight because you allowed too many things to happen before the fight started to be able to win the fight. You lost it before it started. So all your training is secondary to having had the awareness of don't let the friend get behind you, circle out, have your hands up in a non-threatening way, look for weapons around you, understand your environment. And as much as people say it's easy to do that, as much as people say, oh, I'll just do it on the spot, I'm not an idiot, you won't. If you're not training it, when stress comes, you won't do it. So you have to be training pre-fight engagement and situational awareness in an environment that stresses you out in your school in order to be able to apply it in self-defense. And so that's something that's missing. Something that's missing in Nippon Kempo, something that's missing in most styles, almost every style I've ever seen. So I'm not criticizing Nippon Kempo for this. Again, I think this is a style that if it was in the United States, I would train it in a second. I would love to train at a Ashihara school, a Daidojuku school, but I haven't been able to find any near me. I, again, have veered away as I've gotten older from combat sports. And I'm going to explain why. I mean, I still train combat sports. That's kind of a stupid comment on my part because I still train it. But there's things that I don't like about combat sports as I get older. Number one, and this is going to sound ridiculous, I like belts. I like hierarchy. I like tradition. Like I said earlier, I want to have a goal to achieve. If I'm doing a combat sport in my 40s, what's the goal? I'm not going to compete. But, you know, like I'm almost in my mid 40s at this point. What is the point for me to go ruin my body more? I've been doing it 25 years. My body is wrecked. I've herniated discs. I've dislocated my shoulder. My fingers are arthritic. I've hurt my neck. I was told I would never walk again because there was a mass in my spine. Shout out to my collagen, by the way, No Man Labs, for helping me get through it, nomanlabs.com. But yeah, I mean, I just don't want to put my body through that kind of abuse anymore. And then there's no end goal for it. In other words, I'll be 55 or 53 in 10 years, let's say, and then my body will be even worse off. I want things that are maintaining my longevity. So traditional styles tend to be more aware of that. They tend to be more sensitive to age. They tend to have less ego in terms of who's winning the sparring in the gym. Because again, the goal is not necessarily competition. Even though Nippon Kempo has a very strong competitive aspect, it still clearly has the traditional training. You see, these guys are older and they're still demonstrating the technique. You just don't see that in combat sports, modern day combat sports anymore. You don't see an appreciation for that history, the tradition, the culture. So here you get the best of both worlds, in my opinion, if you like that stuff. Some people hate it, which is why combat sports have blown up. You know, like I never even realized how important meditation is, breathing, all these things. And again, they're doing moves that, despite it being a combat sport, these drills are more what you would see for self-defense. Guy throwing a haymaker, drive in, grab the neck. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different. Do I think these are the most effective aspects of the style? No, I think the sparring is what makes you effective, but they clearly do that. So I want to show you guys this video right here, which I think is a perfect example of just how good this system is. These are all white belts. These are like, look, they're all white belts. And they're already in there. They're already moving. They're already reactive. They're doing it in a safe way. They're not cracking each other's heads off. There's a good gym culture. And they're training a lot of dynamic stuff. They're training takedowns. They're training ground fighting. They have to have some degree of situational awareness because the gym is pretty packed and they're fighting around each other. These are white belts. For someone to train a few months, let's say 3 to 6 months, and already be in a place where they're doing all this, that's excellent. That's a style that has a lot of potential to make people effective quickly. So I really love that about the system. Doesn't have, like, first of all, I'm not going to critique the quality of movement from white belts. It's irrelevant. They're in there and they're training hard and sparring already at white belt in a safe way. And they're pulling off some pretty slick moves on each other. I like seeing that. I think that's an example of a style that has a ton of potential. So look, those are my views on the system. I think the system proves, for one, which is nice, that these martial arts have existed long before we give them credit for. This kind of MMA approach to fighting, this sparring approach to fighting. I think we lost it somehow in the mid 1900s to like late 1900s, that's what these systems are about. When even my dad, when he talks about the way he trained Shotokan in the, like 50s and 60s, he says it was brutal. Like they were sparring all the time. So there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, about martial arts in general. The other thing I love about the style is, again, it brings the tradition with the sport together. It comes from a foundation of grappling and realizing how striking is necessary. So that's really, really beautiful. You see, again, and this is something that you don't see in a lot of MMA. A lot of MMA guys will train their boxing or their Muay Thai. They'll train their wrestling, and then they'll train their jiu-jitsu on the ground. And it rarely comes together until they're sparring and putting it all together. This is a system where the striking leads to the takedown, leads to the continued ground fighting. I've talked about that in Sanda before, how in Sanda, the striking sets up your takedowns. It's a very good way to train because you become naturally better at transitions. So it's a transitional fighting system. That applies to Nippon Kempo as well. My biggest pet peeve about this style, they don't train it in the United States. I can't find anywhere. So yeah, I hate you guys. You guys are my enemy. And it's the same thing with this Korean system that kind of has a similar rule set, which I really liked, or even Kudo is very hard to find. Like I said, every system I fall in love with, thank God there's a Kyokushin school near me because I love Kyokushin. But again, this is like exactly how I like training. So yeah, not necessarily for self-defense, just for love of the sport. But I do think that this will make you pretty effective at one-on-one unarmed combat. So yeah, hope you like this video. Like and subscribe. Hope it introduced you to a style that made you realize that modern day MMA isn't the end all of martial arts, like this weird cultish mentality we have nowadays. And that's it.